Hi everyone, welcome to Ask an Armourer. My name's Kia and today I'm going to be showing you one method for gluing down a wire in the process of rewiring your epee. I call this particular method the bend and glue method. If you watched my video on how to do this for foil, it's the exact same process, just with a couple of minor tweaks for dealing with the two wires used in epee versus just the single wire in foil. I'm filming this rewiring process over several videos so I can really break down each phase and sort of give you a heads up about where things can go wrong and how to avoid it based on my past experiences. I'll also be trying to give you the pros and cons that I've discovered of all of these techniques so that you can figure out which one works for you the best. As always, there's no objectively correct method for doing this. I've had success with everything I'm going to show you, as well as what I'm showing you is not comprehensive. At the end of the day, the important thing is that you have a fully functional blade that falls within the technical requirements laid out by the FIE. So just like with my recommendations about what tools you might want to have in your toolkit, I will always recommend that you try a variety of different methods so that you can figure out what works best for you. To start, the parts you're going to need are your clean blade, your epee's barrel, your 2 things of spaghetti wire, and a new wire. As an aside for clarity, there are 2 wires used in epee, but I'm going to refer to the entire thing as the wire in this video, unless there's a reason to draw attention to there being 2. The tools you'll need are your tip setter, a paper clip, your bench-mounted vise or vice grips, another pair of vice grips or a wrench, your rewiring board or chain depending on your preference, super glue, and your towel. For this, I'm going to be using the board as that is my preference, and if you can find it, I always like to use both liquid and gel glue, but if you can just find liquid, that is fine. Before I begin anything, because I'm paranoid, I always make sure to test my cap size of my wire against my barrel opening size. Despite being the same type, I'm using German style here for reference, errors can occur in the manufacturing process that mean they don't fit together nicely immediately. For example, I've had caps where there's a pronounced plastic nub along the edge here from where it was attached to the assembly apparatus, and I had to gently sand that down in order to create a smooth side so that the cap would sit properly. So I just find it easier to check everything beforehand rather than needing to waste supplies and repeat steps as something didn't work. Once that's been confirmed to fit, if you have a bench vise, go ahead and set your epee up in it with the tip upwards, about ½ inch showing above the vice's jaws and with the groove towards you. If you don't have a bench vise, just lay the epee on the workspace in front of you. Next, very gently unwind your wire. Make sure to be careful not to kink the wire or disturb the insulation on it, as this may break the wire and lead to shorts, which would then mean you have to start all over again. You'll also need to make sure that these 2 wires aren't twisted together. Once your wire is as straightened out as possible, thread just an inch or so of the end without the cap through the barrel. The wire should enter through the larger part of the barrel and come out the smaller. Finally, line the wire up with the groove in the epee and tighten the barrel on just by hand. I'll pause here to make a couple of notes. One, we're only going to thread a little bit of wire through at this point, so there's less risk in the next step. If we tighten the barrel fully at this point and end up pinching or snapping the wire with just this amount, it's not a big deal and we can still use this wire to continue with the rewiring process. However, if you thread the entire length of the wire through so that the cap is settled before tightening the barrel, you run the risk of destroying the entire wire. Not the end of the world, of course, but it is frustrating. I've managed to do this a couple of times when I was learning, and it was never fun to realize I had just wasted both time and materials. The second note is that some people at this point like to put thread locker on the threads of the epee in order to hold the barrel on. I've never bothered to do this, as I find if you tighten it properly, it won't give you any issues, and removing a barrel that's been held on with thread locker is really annoying. Plus, it's just one more step in something that's already kind of a lengthy process, but there's nothing wrong with doing so if you find it more secure. So feel free to try it both with and without the thread locker in order to see which you prefer. Now, with all of that being said, once your barrel is held on just by hand tightening, I like to always slide the wire back and forth a little bit to make sure nothing has gotten snagged or pinched at this point. If all seems well, I'll put a quick bend in the wire so it won't inadvertently get pulled out in the next step, and then I'll go ahead and tighten the barrel down the rest of the way. For more details on how I do that, you can check out my video on how to tighten a barrel, which I'll link below. To make sure that the wire doesn't get tangled during this point, I like to drape it over my non-dominant hand, my left hand in this case, in order to keep it out of the way and make sure that it doesn't get tangled up in the wrench as I go ahead and tighten up the barrel. Also, at this point, make sure that you're not inadvertently pulling up on the wire so that it gets pulled out of the barrel. Again, it's not a big deal if it does. All you have to do is remove the barrel and rethread it, but again, it's a mild annoyance that it's nicer to not have to deal with. Now, with the barrel fully tightened, it's time to thread the wire the rest of the way through the barrel. So for this one, I'm using that same wire draping technique, and you can see how this helps the wire come down much more vertically into the barrel. This will just help make it run much more smoothly without getting caught up or snagged on anything. And this is also why it's important to, in the unwinding of the wire phase, make sure that it becomes as straight as you can get it. So again, we're not risking any snags or bumps that could disturb the insulation. So at this point, I'll just take my dominant hand and start running it through slowly and gently. And since I do have the two wires of epee, make sure that you grab both of them so that they run through at a even rate and not either gets too far ahead of the other one. When you get to the end, go ahead and grab your tip setter, and then you're going to simultaneously push gently down with the tip setter while pulling gently down on the wires. You want to do this at the same rate in order to make sure that the wires don't accidentally get bunched up or squished, caught up underneath the cap as you press it down. And now, one more time, because I'm paranoid, I always like to take my tip and weight spring and just place them inside of the barrel at this point to make sure that I can fully depress them. If I can do this, I know that everything is settled properly and I can continue with the wiring process. If it doesn't settle properly, you'll know you have to back off the wire and try and seat it again. Once your wire is settled into the barrel, we need to mount the epee into our wiring rig. I'm using a board as that's my preference, but you can use a chain too. Starting with the tip, place that in one end. For me on the board, this is the end that's been drilled to about 45 degrees. If you're using a chain, it doesn't really matter, as the chain's inherent flexibility will adopt the optimal angles automatically. Then, making sure to hold both the tip and that end of the rig so it stays secure, bend the tang end down into the other end of the rig. If you're using a board, it will stand up like this, and if you're using a chain, it'll have the same shape, just not be able to stand on its own and need to be hung up. And now, you're ready to start gluing. If you have the board like I do, go ahead and just lean it up against the edge of a table or your workbench if you have it. Right now it's on the edge of my couch because I'm still working from my living room. And I always start with the tip up so that all excess glue runs away from it. We don't want to have any incidences where you get too much glue in the cap and it ends up covering it and then it doesn't work. Yes, I know that from experience. So at this point, if you have the gel super glue, go ahead and just put a dot about 1 centimeter away from the end of the blade. This will just create an anchor point so that most of the tension is on that glue spot rather than on the cap, and helps prevent the wires from getting pulled out, as well as if any glue does start running back up towards that area, it can provide a stop for the liquid glue. Finally, with your non-dominant hand, for me it's my left hand, go down about 4 inches from the end of where the wire is and put a bit of tension on it so that the wire is nice and straight in the groove. Then take your liquid glue and just put a dot in the groove and let it slowly roll down from capillary forces and gravity. You can tell where the glue has been based on the color change of the wire. Continue moving down in increments once you see the glue stop moving. Just slowly work your way down, keeping an eye on it as you make your way down the entire length. Once you start getting to the other end, I find I always prefer to stop a few inches shy of where the spaghetti wire starts, just because it's always easier to go back and glue down any excess areas that didn't get properly glued down before, rather than trying to remove excess glue. Once you've glued along the entire length, you can take your paper clip to help smooth out any bubbles or areas where the glue didn't cover as much as you wanted, and just redistribute some of the excess glue. Finally, just as a final cleanup, go ahead and take your towel and quickly wipe off any excess. And now we wait. Go ahead and place your board off to one side or hang your chain up somewhere out of the way while we wait for the glue to dry. I prefer to leave it overnight if I can in order to ensure that everything is completely cured, but if you're at a bit of a rush for time, giving it about an hour should be fine too. Once it's all dry, you're good to reassemble your blade. So the benefit of using this process is that you have really close control of the tension in the wire because you're just applying it as you go along, as well as the fact that since you are applying the glue directly in just one direction, there is much less risk of over-gluing anything. However, the drawbacks are if you inadvertently get interrupted or lose your focus, it can be really easy for there to be differences in tension between the different sections of wire, leading to either greater possibilities of popped wires or wire breaks, depending on if you accidentally put too much or too little additional tension on. As an added bonus, the benefit that I find to using a board is that the board is much sturdier in and of itself, so it is easier to manipulate where the blade goes because the board itself is holding the shape and rigidity. The chain, however, is much more portable, as well as you can hang a chain with the blade angled downwards so that any excess glue does run into the middle and there's not even the possibility of it gumming up either end. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please be sure to like and subscribe, and as always, if you have any questions, comments, or other topics you'd like me to cover, let me know down below. See you in the next one. Bye.